You're listening to LinkdAM. Tell your story on Linked Live and get noticed. You're listening to Carl Wolfenden on the Business Class Show and is not always affiliated with the guests and the topics discussed. Any financial statements are the opinions of the individual, and you should seek professional advice before making any decisions. Upgrade your listening to Business Class, the show that puts you in the big leather comfy seats. So sit back and enjoy our take on the trending business issues of the week.
Howdy, folks. Here he is, the Texas Brit, the guy with the stiff upper lip, filling his 10-gallon hat and his cowboy boots, Carl Wolfenden.
Good morning, and welcome to Linked AM here on Business Class News. And you know, my goodness, it's one of those. It's one of those shows that I've been really looking forward to, because a few weeks ago, if you remember, I had Michael Steiner, who's the executive director of Best Robotics, on the show. And we had a fabulous conversation about training for the future. And it was just supposed to be just a one conversation, an interview. And then all of a sudden it kind of blossomed into this wonderful conversation that sort of led into other areas. And those are the best conversations, aren't they? I mean, we're talking about business shows here and business situations. And there's nothing better when you go in to a situation, you go to a client or a prospect, etc. You start talking about one thing, but then as you start to investigate, the needs and the wants of that prospect or that client, you start to find, well, there's another area here, and it starts to blossom out. And it started to do that with this conversation with Michael. So we talked about, training for the future and, of course, what Best Robotics is about. But, we talked off mic after the show. We were like, there's more to this because we kept sort of hinting on it. So we've got Michael back in the studio, and we're going to touch on a subject that I remember from my military days, but we're going to deep dive into this. And first of all, Michael, thank you for joining me today.
Pleasure being here, Carl.
Well, it's great to have you back on the show. And as I just hinted towards in my intro, we had a great conversation and about training for the future. And it actually blew up on social media. I mean, people were really engaging with that topic, etc. So we know that is something that is in people's minds. But as we talked about, Michael, was that, really we just did, that was the overview. And there's so much more to talk about. And, people have to understand that there are various types of skills as such that need to be put into this training for the future. It's not just about, I'm going to absorb and learn information. You've got to be more you've got to be more sort of strategic in your thinking, even if you don't know. I mean, we're talking about students as well coming through this, but it's for people that are also in the workplace today who have to learn these types of skills. So I kind of said about a skill set that I remember from the military. It was the cognitive resilience type of skill, where people are being more placed under stress in the workforce, etc. And that phrase really, when I learned that phrase, was I've got to learn how to handle stress in the battlefield or in the theater of war or wherever situation I was in. But there's a different meaning, isn't it, in your mind?
Yes, you're right, Carl. But before we deep dive into the cognitive resilience, people deserve a huge compliment. One, because so many responded to the first conversation we had. People are leaving the future aside for a second, and they're asking, so break the skills. Give us what these skills stand for. And they're right. It's not so much diving into what the future is or will be, it's understanding what the skills are. And that's the opening to why there's a need for more conversations as the one we had, but not on the strategy as much as understanding and breaking the skills into details. Because if people cannot decipher what the skills are, how can you train them? How can you understand what should the students or adults be prepared for? And so what you and I agreed on is, instead of starting simple, let's start maybe at the Holy Grail, at one of the more complicated, and hence came the cognitive resilience. And we didn't pick one randomly. We picked one because the corporations of now have become so intense. They are changing so much, so fast. There's no hierarchy. They are fast. They are changing. They're adopting into new technologies, that if a future employee or a new employee isn't resilient, she, he are not only not going to stay there, they are not going to be hired. That's why your association with the Army is so right on target. The only issue is that most of us, have not gone through an Army training like you and I, and are not ready for an environment of cognitive resilience. We'll break it down into these sub-skills. What does cognitive resilience stand for in a few minutes? But you're right. It's not only essential, it's critical. There's no place anymore where you can function without it.
Right. I mean, the thing that I also remember you talking about was you used the phrase fit, flat, and fast. Now, let me say that again. Fit, flat, and fast. And that's the first time I'd heard that phrase as such. So what do you mean by that? And can you give us some examples?
Yes, I'm going to pick one example which I like, because there's almost no one on the planet who doesn't know what the example relates to. But I'll start almost anonymously, without hinting to what's the name of the company. And as we move it with the details of the example, everyone will know. So let's assume that there's a conversation in a company that starts with a small group in that company that is fit, fast, and flat. It's a very well-known company. That small group has an idea, or maybe few ideas, and one of them is, could there possibly a way for us to offer some small mini test, maybe, about delivering few services, maybe few products in a small town, where we would deliver these services in few days? Could we test something like that? First of all, could a model like that work? This is a few years ago. And so they are discussing it. How would it work in that pilot city or town? The group thinks that it might work. There's an executive in the room. The executive says, you know what? This isn't just a silly idea. I like the idea. Would you like to try it? But instead of trying it in a small town, why don't you try it in a bigger city? I'll give you a significant sum of money to launch it. Within a short time, this launch becomes a successful project, which later becomes what Amazon Prime is known now. This becomes few cities. This small group that launched it as a pilot then turns into the East Coast or West Coast pilot. It not only that it changes Amazon forever, it changes the North American market, it changes the world, it changes consumerism, if you want, it changes everything and everyone from a tiny discussion that occurred in a small group because Amazon is fit, fast, and flat. It would have never happened if Amazon doesn't work like this, if the executive didn't sit there, if the people who work there didn't have this ability of cognitive resilience, because when they discussed it, they never in the world imagined that their life would change forever. The example I'll give at the end of the conversation today is the similar example of where I was in a similar situation, but this project where I was started in the same way and took 2.5 years, never ever stopping for 2.5 years. When you start breathing into an idea and it doesn't stop for 2.5 years, day and night, unless you are cognitively resilient, you wouldn't last.
Oh, absolutely.
And nor will the team with you.
Yeah, I mean, I love that example you just gave. I had a guest on my show, Dr. Robin Gaster, who actually wrote a book on Amazon. It was called Amazon the Behemoth. And when I first started reading the book, I thought it was just a book on Amazon, but it went into, and we talked about that on our conversation on the show, where it was absolutely that. It was that they have this incubator sort of mentality where they actually encourage, people to come up with ideas. But as you say, if you're not sort of trained in that way, the stress of having that on your shoulders, could destroy the idea in a heartbeat. So that's why you need to have that.
The corporation wants you to come up with the idea. The first company in Pittsburgh that was sold over $1 billion years ago started with a drawing on a napkin of an employee. If the employee and the team and the executives who envisioned it didn't have that breadth of mind, creativity, and execution, the minute the drawing was put on a napkin, to go from the napkin to the execution, would it have been sold for over $1 billion? Never. Yep. In a lifetime.
Never. No. I was going to ask you one of my questions, but I think we've kind of answered it. What is this skill? Why is this skill so important to today's work environment? But you just mentioned it. But outside of this idea piece, we talked about on the last show about teamwork as such. Does all the team have to have this skill, this cognitive resilience? Because, I take it they do, because that's what we're talking about.
So it really is $1 million question. Do they all have to? You hear me hesitate in answering you. I think they do, because they all play a significant role at the end of the day in delivering success. And so it's impossible to segregate and to say some do, some do not. And it's impossible to also identify in advance who will come up with a brilliancy and a brilliant idea and who will not. I think you expect every one of them to be the one with ingenuity. And therefore, you've got to train everybody to have that cognitive resiliency. And to be honest, seeing 18,000 kids invest robotics, they all influence me and leave me with the impression that each and every one of them has that capacity to succeed. And therefore, each of them should be trained.
Yeah, absolutely. And that just reminds me that the fact that we talked about on the last show, again, just feeding back off what we were talking about. Best Robotics, your program, you put people into different roles. Yes. And hey, I'm in marketing, I'm in production, I come up with ideas, etc. All these different disciplines that we have to create a show as such, and anything there's a lot of stress and a lot of pressure put upon each component and discipline of putting on anything. So you're absolutely right. Everybody, I mean, I'm answering my own question here, but only feeding off what you said, is that they all have to have that skill set, or else, if it's like anything, isn't it? The three-legged stool, if you take one leg away from the stool, it falls apart. You have to have that construction.
But look at Amazon, or look at Elon Musk and what he does. It's not launching the rocket. It's as much as when the rocket comes back to the sea and lands brilliantly. Every piece of the operation which the students learn, every one of these skills has to be delivered in perfection, in brilliancy. They do need to learn each and every skill and master and own them. I cannot downgrade anything, because in the corporation of their future, they will deliver creativity, entrepreneurship, and innovation in each and every piece of it. I remember, and I'm not going into there yet, I remember how one of the pieces of the puzzle which I led was in the budget. That skill that I did not have, and how a young team member who supported me gave me that piece, and a piece that was an enigma for me. Without her, I wouldn't be able to deliver a huge piece.
Yep.
Without her and her brilliancy, the entire complex wouldn't be delivered. Every piece means everything.
I love the fact that you just said that, because I think a lot of people forget that again, it's all about teamwork, about having a successful outcome. There's thousands of people that are in the background, logistics, the innovation, the design, the marketing, the production of it, the engineering, all those types of things. But a lot of people just see the success. They just say, oh, that was fantastic success. But there's so much that went into that. And you talked about that, and I'm sure you're gonna touch on it, as you said, later, but this project you were working on, there's lots of projects that get invented and thought about and launched, etc. But how many of those projects actually reach the end line? Because you've got to have that skill set, that teamwork mentality to move it across it might be a brilliant idea, but there's lots and lots of stories and sort of case studies of people that, they came up with the same idea, but they were just couldn't push it over the finish line. And it's the people that do push it over the finish line that are the ones that are successful.
So let's do what I'm sure the listeners by now are asking themselves. So how do you break cognitive resilience? What
Yes.
are the pieces made of? So there's more than one definition to cognitive resilience, but I'm going to break it into the pieces that I find the most effective one. So here are a few pieces of the puzzle that we believe in Best Robotics. So here they are, Carl. One is increasing the capacity of our students, showing them year after year that their capacity to handle load grows, that they can do more and not less. We do it in few ways. First of all, because they participate in BEST for 7 years, we show them that although we change things every year, they can do more and not less. So they learn, they gain the insight, I can really do more than I thought. So simply capacity growth. We also teach them setting goals, time management, various specific tools that break something. You use the term things that seem to be behemoth. So initially you get scared when you see something and you say, oh my goodness, it's the Everest. I'll never be able to climb it. But when you are able to break it into sub-teams, into goals, that scary thing becomes reasonable. So these specific tools make scary things easier. And there's more, but I want to move forward because this is only one segment on cognitive resilience and not many segments. The other thing which we teach, which scares the of so many people, is ambiguity. Ambiguity, the unknown of what's coming, simply turns people to dysfunctional. So we train the young minds of the students at best to see the huge advantages of an ambiguous situation. When you don't know what's coming, what feeds typically is creativity, your own idea, especially if you're not alone. When you're in a setting of a team, the students come in and fill the void with ideas, with crazy ideas. Most frequently, those crazy ideas are the winners. So we train them to see that the crazy ideas are the winners, and how ambiguity is often the advantage versus downloading answers. So that's number two, mapping ambiguity. The uncertainty becomes a grid. Number three, and we are switching from the more administrative skills in cognitive resilience into the more emotional skills of cognitive resilience. Now we are in the part of the emotional strength. On the emotional side, we train them to develop compassion and empathy. When you grow your compassion and empathy to others, to yourself we'll touch in a minute. When you grow compassion and empathy to others, your own strength evolves. When you work in a team and you become dependent, remember, Carl, what I said about the team member who helped me with the budget of an enormous project, how I feel about her years later. That's the empathy, the appreciation. When you have a huge project, as in BEST, and you work in sub-teams, you cannot do everything by yourself. You start developing appreciation to people. That reduces anxiety and stress. You develop that appreciation. And so that's our number three. I'll let you breathe and see if you have any question about any of these meanwhile.
No. I mean, I think again, it's very important for people to be listening to this to say, you know, these are things that don't come naturally, and especially in the environment that we're in at the moment, where everything's technical and interactive, etc. It's all about me and the machine. But you have to understand, and again, we've touched on it before, you are part of a team. You're part of a bigger picture. It's not about just yourself.
So going back to the Amazon example for a second. So you sit with this crazy idea, we'll develop a system that delivers packages within 24 hours. You come up with this crazy idea, and then you ask yourself, how will I deliver this? So the person next to you who specializes in logistics will say, don't worry about that. We, the logistics team, will come up with a system. Your bonding with your mates evolves. So we train in BEST relationship, social relationship, bonding in a corporation. Without relationship, without that dependency, there's no resilience. You cannot undertake anything if you do not depend, rely, and have that relationship. If you do not trust, forget the whole company, goes down the drain.
Yeah, it does. And the thing is that again, we live in a world of stress. I mean, everybody wants something to happen now. This thing of instant gratuity sort of thing, and say, oh, I want this to happen now. We all get stressed about that. But if we have people around us that take away those anxieties, that's the key. What you just said is, yeah, I'm going to worry about what I need to worry about. But if I started to worry about everything else around me, I wouldn't sleep. I'd become ill, and that's the problem. And that's why you have to learn to work with people.
So the second person will say, we will package it. The third person will say, we will deliver it.
Yep.
We will figure out the budget of how to make it financially feasible. That's the bonding of the team. The pilot needs to make sense, not the internal relationship. The relationship will have to be rock solid. The next piece of the skill is really something that we are struggling with as a society. Because outside of this team that we train, there is an environment of everything is wrong. We keep criticizing everything. So what we train inside best is an environment of optimism. Whatever it is that you do, believe in it. It's the right thing. Develop an optimistic viewpoint. Don't develop a distrust. Believe in what you do and generate that atmosphere towards each other. Don't start criticizing everything. Develop an optimistic view. It doesn't mean not having a critical point of view. That's not the point. The point is developing an optimism towards your goal, towards what you're trying to achieve, and not shooting each other in your legs.
So can I ask a question on that though? Because so is that a lot of people call company cultures as such, and some people debate, well, culture is just a word, etc. But is it top down and bottom up? Is it how does it need to? Because you've got to have a manager or an executive that has that same optimism. And you're right. You're gonna be able to critique something, but to allow to somebody within in an environment of optimism, you've got to have that as the whole culture of the company, correct, from the top.
So I think you're asking the wrong person, because I believe that each student is the most amazing thing I've seen. I believe that each team is the most amazing thing I've seen. I believe in the schools. I believe in their teachers. I believe in their hubs. Is that the culture of the organization? I'm not sure. It is what I believe, and it is what I love. Does it turn into a culture? You shouldn't ask me. You should ask others. I'm biased, completely biased. I truly believe in that. I truly love them. And when I stand in front of them, I tell them that. I don't think I can be anything else. I really love them. I care for them. I want them to succeed.
Well, that's because my question was more about a corporation. So somebody, so an Amazon, for example.
Sure.
But I think what you just said is the attitude that a corporation's executive C-suite should have about their employees and their partners, etc.
I'll be biased. I believe that had you had a conversation with Jeff Bezos, he would have said to you, and Elon Musk, they would have said to you, and I'm not comparing, obviously, they would have said the same thing in different words, in their own voice. I think at the end of the day, people who do what we do is done not to deliver packages, to shoot rockets. It's done because we love people.
Yep, absolutely. I love that. Sorry, I interrupted your grid there, but you know me now. We love to have these conversations. It opens it up.
It is an interruption. It's an interpretation of how much we love people.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked about optimism. So what's the next in the grid?
We're left with only really two. The next one is the one thing that our students spend most of the time speaking about. Had you had a conversation with Oprah Winfrey, you would understand why they speak about it so much. I've heard Oprah more than once. It hurts her, it hurts me that this is such a difficulty for young people, and therefore I understand why this is such an issue. Self-efficacy, the self-worth, which students speak about when they say, am I worth it? Am I good enough? After best, they don't speak this way. They say, I now know what I'm worth. It still comes from a very deep place. I think the whole best is worth just for this, so that they can understand their own value and they can acquire it with their own heart, with their own hands, with their own beautiful minds. But without it, there's no way to go, nowhere to go. They cannot move into a career and future if they cannot identify what's their own value. They call it self-confidence, they call it leadership, our students, but that's the self-efficacy. They've got to move step by step by understanding their true value. That is a huge piece of cognitive resilience. This grid of resiliency will be broken if you cannot identify if you cannot identify your own value.
I think no, I was going to say, I think at the end of the day, I think some of the problems that I see out there, just in general, is if you're not put into an environment that allows you to observe and start to get feedback, and you can ask questions and you start to actually feel confident in yourself. Because if you're put into a room on your own and you just have a speaker and it's saying, oh, can you tell us how you're feeling today? It will come out through what you know, and it will be just a one-dimensional sort of push information out. But if you put somebody in an environment where there's information, data, conversation, comment, feedback, etc., you can then start to say, well, actually, this is what I felt when I first came in here into this room, but now I'm getting all this feedback. Now I can actually start to talk about things that I now start to understand. And then I start to understand who I want to be. But if you're on your own and you're just in a vacuum, you will as you say, you won't progress. You'll just become, just a person that's just moving from one thing to another. And you don't want that. You want to have that feedback, that comment, and that support and love, as you call it, from your fellow colleagues and student friends and mentors.
In order to contribute to the team, to the company, to the community, you've got to gradually acquire your self-worth. This isn't about anything remotely connected to grandiosity. Not at all.
No.
It's about being able to plug in.
Yep.
You've got to own that. There's no way you can achieve if you cannot acquire it. The last piece of the puzzle, the surprising one for some, and that is the connection between cognitive resilience and the greater good. We've learned over many, many years of watching the grid of cognitive resilience that when you know how the things you do contribute to the greater good, your stress, your resilience grows. Your stress goes down, resilience grows. This bridge helps people to do more, to contribute more, to achieve more. How does what we do as a team, what we do as a corporation, make the world a better place, the community a better place, the school a better place? When you understand that bridge, you walk it better. you're stronger. You don't think of the challenges, you think of the goals, and you become stronger, more firm, you're assertive, and you do way more. So that's the last piece.
Well, I tell you, but I want to ask questions about that, because I mean, one of the things that when I saw what you'd written about what we were going to talk about, etc., because that's what we do. There's no secret about that. We like to talk about how we're going to take the show to make it valuable to the listeners and to the readers that are reading the article as well. But I saw that greater good piece, and then I started thinking, well, what does that really mean? Because at the end of the day, yeah, you're producing something so that somebody can benefit from it. Well, it's much bigger than that. It's much bigger than that. And I started to think about people that I know that are passionate about a cause, or they're passionate about some sort of drug that they're developing that is going to change somebody's life as such. Well, those people have got a different attitude. When you meet them in a room, you can see them glowing when they start to. You ask them about it, they're proud about it. They know that they have got that passion to take it over the finish line. And then once they have done, what's next? I want to see what's next. And those are the types of people that really stand out in the community, as you say, and make it a better place. And so if we and the thing is, it's not just about just a few people. You think about, there's I can name some names, but I'm not going to. But on my hand, I've got 5 people in my head. But that's not just 5 people. It can be 40 million, 3 billion people. We all have something to give back to, this wonderful world that we live in. But we've just got to tap into it, and that's the key.
So the promised example. So, which I promised at the beginning, which
yes,
I was part of in a team. So a proposal, a tiny proposal with few $100s at the end of it, suddenly get accepted. And I lead that proposal. And then the receiving side says, well, you know what? Can you quickly, within an overnight, turn this proposal into a $3 million proposal project? And so the team, which I now lead because of my expertise, stays for few days and few nights in the office. At least those who do not say, but we work 9 to 5. There was only, I think, 1 member. All the rest said, we're staying. I wasn't the executive. I was a VP. Suddenly the entire company becomes flat. The president says, Michael, what is it that you see as a wall in front of you? What do you need? What are the key pieces to turning this tiny document into a significant $3 million proposal for a project? And I did see a wall. And gradually, the president says, everything which is going to melt the wall in front of you will be done, will help you melt that wall. That's the lack of resiliency, the things that disturb you. And he helped. That's the flat. Gradually, I started seeing the pieces I need. Each and every team member plugged in. And we started functioning quickly. Within 2-3 days, a proposal was in place. To make it quicker, that 3 became $8 million. And so now what was few days became few months. Within the few months, the receiving side changed their mind and said, you know what? We may want this to become a project that influences each child in our country. And therefore, it's not anymore a potential of an $8 million project. It's a project that may turn to be hundreds of million dollars project. And hence it became a project that occupied us for 2 years. The team obviously had to grow from the team that worked on it initially to a team that was established in few countries and had to work non-stop, traveling to these different countries and work intensively for more than 2 years. No more walls in front of us, just the ability to keep working non-stop and rely on each other wherever we are. Discover, where do we have difficulties? Where is it that we need to add functions, to rely more on each other? And so on and so on. Did we at the beginning think that this can evolve and grow and grow? No. But the corporations of the world expect things to evolve this way.
So was the something, you know, so you took it from that small idea as such, and then you saw it grow, and the budget grew, and etc. The opportunity grew. Was the greater good at the other end the thing that drove you and the team, do you think?
The greater good was a piece of a puzzle which we initially thought was, like in Best, an education program, which we thought would start by educating university students. And then gradually the client said, well, maybe not just the students in a university level, maybe we should expand it on our side to more, to high school students. And then the client said, maybe we should include elementary school students. The more we engaged, the more we were strong enough not to say, wait, are we strong enough on our side to deliver so much? Are we resilient enough? And remember, I'm not giving you all the pieces of the puzzle that on our side, there were team members who said, God, this is becoming behemoth. This is so big. Let's stop it.
Right.
We weren't Amazon. We were smaller than Amazon. But the president, the head of the company said, no, keep going. However big this potential is, go with it. And whatever you need, stay strong. Just keep telling us what is it that is needed to grow. Let the clients demand and express the true need. Forget what it started with. Keep your eyes on the potential. It's really the same concept of the example we began with, Carl. It started with a small incubated idea, and the demand set the course.
Yep.
And that's the fit, fast, and flat.
So how do people measure? How do corporations measure this? I mean, is it just you have the milestones that you put in place during the whole process, and you've got the same, because you know you've got to have a commitment to this, but also, as you say, the president said you got to keep going, keep that opportunity ahead of you, keep it in sight. But he has to have milestones to make sure that he's measuring the fact that you're going in the right direction.
So there's two types of measurements here. One is that the corporations expect, and this is where we began, Carl, the previous conversations and this one, and probably the next ones, the corporations expect the team members all to be able to function this way. So they measure the people they interview, and they assume all of us to be able to function this way. They don't want anyone, if the opportunity would fall in your lap, they want you to function this way. If you show signs of cracking, if an opportunity would fall into your hands, you're not in. They expect the opportunities that you create them, that you lead them. And if you are unfit, don't come in. So that's one measurement you're talking about. The other ones is that all these corporations have deliverables and measurements in all the projects we described, both in Amazon, in SpaceX, in the company that I was involved in, all of them. There is no day without deliverables and measurables. Right. It's accountability every single minute. It's business, business, business. Even if you're a non-for-profit, you still need to work with a mindset of deliverables and measurables. You train this way, you work this way.
Talking with you, Michael, because you get my mind going, and as you hinted towards that, we're going to have a series of these conversations that we're putting together. And unfortunately, we're coming to the end of this segment, and we knew it was going to go long, this one, because it was such an important sort of start to this series. What I would love
harder this time, because the cognitive resilience is a more complex. It's the matrix.
Well, it's yeah. If you understand that piece, the other things that we're going to start talking about really fall into place. And I know we've talked about that. And so, yeah, we wanted to start with the more complex, skill set, the cognitive resilience as such, and that grid that you just talked about. So just in summary, because let's wrap up with BEST, okay? And everything that we've just talked about, you've touched. I love how you do it. You touch on different things of how BEST really fits into that whole sort of environment. But in summary, how do you think that BEST really delivers that great grounding that helps people and the students understand cognitive resilience?
With a smile, because some people will listen to it and may have an association with something else, but training the student to be strong again.
Love it. That's all you need to say, because you're absolutely right. Because again, we talk about, don't we, individuals are just an individual until they understand how important they are. And by putting them through the program, I'm learning this every single time I talk to you. You're educating them. You're training for the future. We talked about that, and then all of a sudden, these skill sets are starting to be instilled in them, and you put them in an environment to succeed, and that's the key.
Yes.
Well, Michael,
training.
Yep. Training. And listeners know that I talk about education all the time. It doesn't matter what it is. It's about absorbing information and putting it into practical situations. And I think that's the whole idea of everything we're talking about. And I don't care if you're 6 years old or you're 90 years old. You're always, being in an environment where you can learn something. And some people say I look like I'm 90 years old, so I'm still learning. But other than that,
you need to change their glasses.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Michael, thank you so much again for being on the show. This has been a great start to our series. We'll put all the information again up on Business Class News, and also innovate5.com, of course, which is a little project that we've started as our community, and we'll be putting all of this plus our interviews on there. And we will be giving hints and little snippets of information of our next series over the coming weeks. So appreciate it, Michael. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you so much, Carl. Stay resilient.
Oh, I will, and I'll be very cognitive about doing that. So that, of course, that was Michael Steiner, Executive Director of BEST Robotics, Inc. And all I want to really sort of just summarize this show on was you've got to listen to what Michael is saying about all those examples, because we can all live in a vacuum. We can all sort of see a project that was successful, but we've got to also understand all the components, as I say, the disciplines that went into that success story. I love the analogy that Michael made with SpaceX, and when that first went up and those rockets came back down and they landed in the middle of the ocean on that landing platform, I thought, oh, that's just a remote control. They're little models, but they weren't. They were really, those were the rockets that were coming down from the launch vehicle, and it was like, that is amazing. Well, all of that didn't just happen overnight. There was a team that actually sat down. They came up with that idea, and they made it happen because they were working as a team. And again, we're talking about this as a business class news. You can put all of this information into action and look at how you're going to run your own business. So please listen to this and take away the really key points of this interview with Michael, because Michael is one of the most intelligent people I've ever really interviewed, because he has a different perspective. So again, yeah, I'm just honored to have him on the show. So until the next time, we will, of course, be here. You can read Business Class News every single day on businessclassnews.com. And, as I always say, be safe out there. Have fun, make some money because it's business, of course, and be safe. Okay, till the next time. Bye-bye.